Everyone out there, Dan here from Geekcast Radio, doing another comic book haul video. This is where I go through my recent pickups. I don't do any in-depth reviews, so if you've not read any of the books, don't worry about spoilers, as I have not read most of these as well. For those books that I feel like are worthy of discussion or I have something to say about it, I'll do a more in-depth review where I go into the actual content of the comic. This is just going through my recent pickups. And one of the books was looking forward to the most this week was the relaunch of The Punisher by Matthew Rosenberg. And with that, I thought I'd take a trip to the dollar bin to see if there was any Punisher comics that kind of went along with that. And I did find a few, starting with this one, which is Punisher Warzone number 13. And I honestly picked this up mainly due to the actual cover of the book. And I don't buy books for comics just for the covers, but it's only $1. Hey, why not? I just found it kind of humorous. Good branding from the Punisher, right? You know, it's a good way to keep his logo out there. Perhaps it'll let villains know where he's at, but you know, when you're the Punisher, maybe that's your goal. And I don't know if it's supposed to be a spoof of that classic screensaver of the 90s back then, but I thought it was kind of funny, so I picked it up. And very un-Punisher-like. Also picked up Wolverine and the Punisher number 2 of 3. I have, I think, own issue 1 or 3. I know I own 1. I don't know issue number 2. I picked this up. Punisher and Wolverine were two of the favorite characters of the 90s. They have very similar philosophies when it comes to dealing with evil people or villains. Both okay with killing, although Punisher probably more okay than the Wolverine. And they both have tragic pasts, so they actually, I think they're when they're together, they can actually have some pretty interesting stories. So I know Wolverine showed up in some really good issues of Punisher War Journal back in the day, so it makes sense that they were doing these. They did these miniseries. I don't know if they'll do more with Wolverine finally coming back. And with his new powers and new costume that recently debuted, which I know, of course, that went over well with the internet. No, it didn't. People hated it because I at least that was my reading of it, but we'll see. Also picked up this, which is Punisher number 75. Very 90s cover with the foil and the shininess, and I liked a little bit of the Omni cover, the blood coming down. It almost forms a little bit of a skull there on the side, but yeah, I thought it was kind of cool, worthy of $1 again, so picking it up. And I picked this up again because of the relaunch of this title, Punisher number 1 by Matthew Rosenberg. I was really liking Matthew Rosenberg's take on Punisher so far. He's been doing it since Legacy with the Punisher War Machine story. That's been a lot of fun. I know some people didn't love it as much. I just thought it was over the top and really enjoyable. It came to its natural conclusion, though. It didn't, I think, overstay its welcome, which I was fearful of. And by the time he gave up the armor, it actually, I think, made sense. And I was kind of glad it wasn't just him being kind of beaten out of it, but it was a decision that was a little bit more personal than that. So it's kind of cool seeing him going back to the street level. Once again, I believe this is supposed to be dealing much more with the fallout of the Secret Empire, which I don't know how excited I am about that. For those that don't know, during Secret Empire, Punisher worked for Hydra, which I know did not go over well with many Punisher fans. So I don't know if that's also going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths if it's dealing with that. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll give more explanation to why he did it, or maybe he was being a secret agent. Who knows? But again, that wasn't Matthew Rosenberg who wrote that. That was Nick Spencer, who we'll talk about later. We'll see how that moves, but I was excited to see where it goes. I didn't see more of a street level Punisher, more of his bread and butter. I picked up this book mainly because it looked interesting, and I thought I'd give it a shot. Beast of Burden number 1 from Dark Horse, from Evan Dorkin and Benjamin Dewey, who are two people I don't have super familiar with, but I thought it looked kind of cool. The art actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Jeff Lemire and Tyler Jenkins, very folksy. Takes place in the Poconos, which is not far from where I grew up, so it kind of had me excited. And dealing with anthropomorphic animals, not anthropomorphic, but animals that talk, which I'm a big fan of. So we'll see how this goes. And I know that Aftershock has an animosity book with animals that become self-aware and dealing with the fallout of them versus humans and how that's gone about. This seems very different. It seems more like a folk tale in comic book form, which can work out. I like that. I think a lot of times indie publishers lean very heavily on things like horror and high science fiction, which it can work, but I'm liking when they can take a chance in a book like this. So I thought I'd give it a shot and see if it's something I'd actually pick up on a monthly basis. A book I do pick up on a monthly basis is Black Hammer, Black Hammer Age of Doom number 4. This to me has been one of the best books on the stand since its debut. Jeff Lemire again. Speaking of Jeff Lemire, writing this title, and I actually thought issue 3 was a better Sandman story than the Sandman we got from Vertigo not too long ago. But for those that like deconstruction takes on superheroes, that maybe aren't as nihilistic, this is a great book to pick up. I will say, don't start with Age of Doom. Go back to Volume 1. Dark Horse likes to do this thing where when a new volume starts, they go back to new numbering and then make it seem like it's separate miniseries instead of actually being a continuous story, which sometimes works, like with Yojimbo, for example. Like he has a similar situation where that story I think is a little bit more self-contained. This, on the other hand, if you pick up Age of Doom #1 by itself, you would be greatly lost because it legitimately picks up the very next scene after the previous issue. So I don't think you'd get nearly as much out of it. But highly advise picking up Black Hammer. It's been an amazing book. A book I'm really excited about that is finally coming back is Black Panther, with Black Panther #3. This got delayed. I think Daniel Acuna got backed up for reasons, but it's finally coming out with issue #3. I was a little intrepid about this idea of Black Panther in space, but after the first 2 issues, I'm all in on it. It's Star Wars with a Black Panther aesthetic, and it's actually kind of welcoming for new readers. There are a lot of questions I have about this. There's a lot of things we don't know yet, but so if you're not a person who's read Black Panther and you're reading this and you're having all these questions, know that those are natural, and we know it takes place in the future. These characters seem somewhat connected to characters of the past. How connected, we're not sure. Is this really T'Challa? What exactly does this all mean? Don't know yet, but we're only 2 issues now, 3 issues in. But it's been a lot of fun. And as speaking as someone who didn't love the Black Panther run before this is kind of that like revamp that really ended up working, which is kind of the thing now with Marvel. A lot of new, old stuff is happening. Again, kind of new and old at the same time. Avengers with Avengers #6. Jason Aaron wraps up his first arc with this book, and I gotta say, like, I've been liking this, but knowing Jason Aaron was doing the Avengers, I was really excited. And to me, he's Marvel's best writer still. And I was hoping that Avengers would feel like the Avengers again, and somewhat it does, and somewhat it doesn't. I thought last issue was the best issue of the series so far. It felt like all the pieces he was building finally got to something, or were going to lead to something. Hopefully that payoff comes here. But at the same time, it just feels a little disconnected. The team doesn't feel organically put together as much of the better Avengers runs so far. And although I've liked a lot of the voices he's had, obviously he knows how to write Thor. I actually think he writes a better Iron Man in this, in the current Iron Man series. His character seems to have a little bit more depth to him. Some of the other characters, like Carol Danvers, even Black Panther, they feel like they're not really as integral to the story as of yet. That can change. It's Avengers. They'll probably have their moments as well. But it's hopefully it's building to something eventually. It's just sometimes Jason Aaron takes his time, and it's not to the level that I would hope for. But I could see it getting there if all the things that it's building to actually end up coming into play. Excuse me. Speaking of books that are coming into play, we have Amazing Spider-Man #4. It's funny that this is actually on 4, that debuted like a month or 2 after Black Panther, but it's already ahead of it. But hey, I'm not complaining because I've been really enjoying this. A lot due to Brian Otley's take on this. He's kind of made to draw Spider-Man now that he's kind of off Invincible. And Nick Spencer's writing of Spider-Man has also worked quite well. I like this idea of splitting up Peter Parker and Spider-Man much more than I ever thought I would. It's somewhat obvious, but that obviousness, it's never happened before. So taking power and responsibility and legitimately pulling them apart and seeing what happens. Also the Tri-Sentinel, and I'm always a huge fan when any time we get cross-contamination of villains, like with X-Men showing up in Spider-Man, or X-Men villain showing up in Spider-Man, or Batman villain showing up in Superman. And I know Tri-Sentinel's shown up in previous Spider-Man stories, but when I think Sentinels, I think X-Men. And it's been quite good. I'm enjoying this a lot. So if you're a person that maybe was looking to get back on Spider-Man because you weren't digging Stan Slott's run, I think this has actually kind of been quite good. I've loving it. Another book I've been enjoying a great deal, and speaking of Jeff Lemire, I feel like you could probably have a pull list of Jeff Lemire books, and each week you would still have a lot of titles, because he's written, he had a bunch of books I didn't even pick up, like The Terrifics, this week as well. The Sentry is him doing a Black Hammer story in the Marvel Universe, basically. Taking the duality of the character of Sentry, taking him and basically putting in a situation where you get like a normal everyday person, and also the superhero in one world. It began where we see Sentry has a world has been built for him where he can be the Sentry, and the Void can come, and it's okay because it's like this Matrix X reality where nothing really anything that happens doesn't actually impact actual people, but he has to go there every 24 hours. But his ability to go there gets destroyed, and we're discovering why and by who as this goes on. So, we have Jeff Lemire doing Terrifics, which is very much Fantastic Four. And this is somewhat Superman, but not really. It is very much the Sentry. So if you hate the Sentry, but maybe like Jeff Lemire, I don't know if this would win you over, because it's very much in the mythos of the Sentry. But I've been liking it. I'm one of the few people that don't hate the Sentry, so I've actually enjoyed that book. Another book I'm really looking forward to, again, an old but new book, West Coast Avengers. #1 is coming out. This is by Kelly Thompson. And I really love Kelly Thompson's run on Hawkeye with Kate Bishop and Clint Barton in that as well. And it felt like it wasn't the makings of a West Coast Avengers story, because the last volume did deal, it wasn't in the West Coast in California, and now it's actually happening. The only concern is that I'm not a huge fan of every character on here. Gwenpool, for example, I'll say I've never read a Gwenpool book, so I can't necessarily say if the character is good or bad, but everything about that character just did not appeal to me. So I don't know how it'll work within this. We'll see. And it looks a little bit more like, a little bit more fun, a little bit more comedic than the actual Avengers story, which I think makes sense. You can't just feel like the Avengers B. You need to feel like your own thing, and putting Kelly Thompson on it, I think, accomplishes that. The only DC book I've been really picking up this week is Action Comics 1002. I think Bendis as Superman is one of the most talked about books online right now, even if it's not one of the best-selling books, and that's part of the conversation at times, is how it's not selling as well as people wanted it to. And I can kind of see why, although I think his Action Comics has, to me, been a lot better than Superman, because I think it's getting to his strengths, dealing with the more street level, even though Jonathan Kent I'm forgetting. Even though Jonathan Kent is not in this, his presence is felt. You feel, unlike Superman, you feel him, like you see Superman and Clark Kent dealing with Lois not being there, and it feels like people are wondering where she is. So I've been enjoying that aspect of it. And there's a secret cabal that's been there in the background that we're learning about, that have been kind of doing all these things, manipulating them. So unlike Superman, which has been dealing more with the Rogazar type of stuff, this to me is really where Bendis should sign. Like, honestly, like if they gave Superman someone else and just let him do Action Comics, I think it probably would work out better. So if you're someone who didn't like Superman, maybe check out Action Comics, because it's, I think, makes for a much better book. And the last book for me for this week, kind of the book of the moment right now in comics, or one of the books of the moment at least, is Venom, with Venom #5. Donny Cates has been killing it as of late. A lot of huge things, revamping everything we know about Venom, and kind of changing a lot of mythos within the world of Marvel, even with last issue learning about where Nowhere came from. So he's been kind of wielding a big stick when it comes to Marvel, changing a lot, and it's been working. So probably one of the bigger books that came out this week is Venom. And as a person who's never cared about Venom, he's got me to care about Venom. I'd still hope to get more characterization of the character Eddie Brock. That's one thing I think that's been missing. Hopefully that will happen moving forward. But again, it's been kind of a fun ride for sure. But that's all the books up for me for this week. What did you pick up? What have you been looking forward to? Just remember, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.